Welcome to Psych Sessions on Teaching and Learning Centers. My name is Chris Hackala, and I'm your podcast host. In this series of conversations, we speak with folks who have made the leap from a traditional faculty member position to a role in a center for teaching and learning. The conversations focus on how individuals moved from faculty to a center and how that move impacted their work, their career trajectory, and their personal and professional identity. Along the way, we talk about tips, advice, and challenges that come from working in a center. Sit back and enjoy these chats on Psych Sessions on Teaching and Learning Centers. I wanted to just say thanks to Jordan Troisi for being here today. Jordan is from Colby College. He's the Senior Associate Director for the Center for Teaching and Learning. Jordan, welcome. I'm happy to have you here.
Thanks, Chris. Good to be here.
Yeah. So, Jordan, I really appreciate you taking the time. Even though we are in the summer, and both of us have both been faculty members and had a little bit more flexibility, I know that both of us are very busy in the summer as we try to sort of navigate things. And there are times where I feel a little bit of, even after 9 years, a bit of a shock to the system to not having that flexibility and freedom over the summer. And it makes me think about the motivation I had for going into a teaching center. And I'm sort of curious if you can sort of talk through a little bit about how you led yourself into this career where you are now, because you're relatively early in your career. So I'd just like to sort of know the pathway that led you here.
Sure. Happy to do it. So let's see. So my background, my PhD training is in psychology, social psychology in particular. I went to graduate school at the University at Buffalo, SUNY. And while I was there, I figured out that I was really interested in sort of the more, teaching focuses of faculty life. So I'd gone to Albion College for undergrad and worked with my mentor there, Drew Christopher. And
I think some of us know Drew Christopher on this.
Some people might. And
some people might.
He, really instilled in me, a passion for teaching, for collaborative scholarly work, including scholarly work with undergraduates. It did not take long in my pathway in graduate school to realize that I wanted to go a route that made teaching the really central point of my career.
Yeah.
So as I neared the end of graduate school and was preparing for teaching-focused institutions, one of the things I started doing to try to set myself apart from other colleagues that might be applying for similar types of jobs is I started engaging in a lot of the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, or SOTL. Both Drew and, as it just so happened, someone else who lived nearby who's done an awful lot of Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, Guy Boyson, provided me some guidance on how to get those kinds of things started. And some collaborators and I from my graduate program did a little SOTL study with some courses that we were teaching and found some effects. Later, would end up being published in Teaching of Psychology. As it goes, it took a couple years, but very thrilled that landed. And found that in addition to it, maybe being a good thing to have on my vita for the sake of applying for jobs, I just found it a really fun and interesting way to think about teaching. And I continued that work in the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning for, up until today. So let's see, I don't remember the exact year of that publication, but that work had to occur sometime around 2010, 2011, something like that.
So what's interesting about that, Jordan, is that so far I've talked to a few people, and I'm going to continue to talk to people. And for a lot of us, it started in graduate school. And I did a SOTL project in my graduate program on high school psychology. And it was back in the 90s, looking to see if high school psychology was going to lead to gains in the college level course. And that got me contact with a lot of people that are involved in the Society for Teaching Psychology. And so although I didn't work with anyone directly until a little bit later in my graduate school career who did that, I was able to make that connection. And it sounds like you had that sort of at the get-go with working with Drew as an undergraduate and then in graduate school. So I think that's really terrific. And I think it's one of those things that people who really like teaching seem to find out pretty early on that that's a path they want to go down.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I would say, I think something that is true as well is that, members of the Society for the Teaching of Psychology, I've been a long time member, as well as other individuals, whether it's outside of STP that are just, passionate and invested in their teaching. I have generally found them to be just tremendously giving folks, right? Mm-hmm. Great at sharing materials and collaborating and working on ideas together. As I often describe it, when we think about the frameworks we might think about for, your research one types of faculty members as compared to your teaching focused faculty members. Research one faculty members often want to kind of get ahead, right? Mm-hmm. To edge the next person out, to do, right? Whereas teaching focused individuals, they may, don't get me wrong, they like to find the new finding, right? They're all about sharing what they've learned, right? And saying, this worked in my class, try it in your class. So I think something that, in addition to wanting that sort of professional life, I think I also really found that these are the kind of people that I want to be around, and the longer I've been at my work, both as a faculty member and now as an educational developer, the more I've come to find that what really keeps you going is the people you get to work with. The work is good, but it's the people you get to work with that really take the cake.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely the case. You learn. And STP is a perfect example. You learn the people who share your passion, and you learn how to make connections with them. And they are. I tell this story. I went to a conference in '95, right after I finished my PhD, and I was talking about this SOTL project, and I happened to be talking with Barney Bynes and Jane Hallinan and Randy Smith and Alan Feldman and all these people who were doing STP stuff as well as high school psychology stuff. And it was my foray and entry into this area. And it really is. And it wasn't as if they were saying things like, we don't want to see this work. It's like, great, come talk to us about this work. Join us and work with us on this kind of stuff. So it really is. It's an inclusive, inviting environment.
Absolutely. I think, that was a game changer for me in trying to figure out where I wanted to go professionally. So let's see. I haven't gotten very far in my trajectory.
That's okay.
As far as graduate school, where should we go next? Faculty life?
Yeah, faculty life would be great. Tell us a little bit about your first job and any contact you had with teaching and how that led you into where you are now, because you made a big move. So.
Yeah. So let's see. After I wrapped up graduate school, I believe it was 2011, I took my first faculty appointment. It was a visiting faculty member at Widener University in Philadelphia. Oh. Mm-hmm. As luck would have it, it was before I had finished my PhD, but I would wrap that up the next summer. Mm-hmm. And I was visiting there for a couple of years. As is probably true of many faculty members right out of graduate school. Mm-hmm. They might not have all the qualifications you might ideally want for a tenure track position. And I think that's kind of where I was. I was kind of close, but not quite over the hump. And yep. So I started my work as a visiting faculty member there, so a teaching focused institution just outside of Philadelphia. And, you do what you do at a teaching focused institution, teach 3 or 4 courses a semester, lots of hands-on time with students, do some advising. As I had really come to enjoy during my undergraduate years, I started engaging in some research mentorship with some students there in the psychology department, mm-hmm. Including, a couple of students that would end up, we'd end up publishing some work together in the years to come through the whole pipeline. I was there for 3 years. During that time, found out that there was not going to be the opportunity for renewal of that position. So went on the job market again. And in 2014, I believe it was, I landed at Sewanee, the University of the South, so mm-hmm. Liberal Tennessee, in a tenure track line as a social psychology faculty member. For those of us at small schools, we know that often means you're the one social psychologist, and that's for a while. So I began that tenure track line there. It was a great place to work. I'm happy to go into things at length. Had a lot of great opportunities to work with folks there, including and a lot of sort of major teaching initiatives. As it just, I had continued while I was at Widener, actually the very, at the sort of faculty gathering that happens at the beginning of the school year. Just as I was starting at Sewanee, I learned from a colleague there, Betsy Sandlin, that they were about to begin a task force to found or sort of reestablish, I suppose, a rather dormant Center for Teaching at Sewanee. And we had the opportunity to cross paths and we talked about, the kinds of things I've been involved in. And before I knew it, I was in my first year sitting on that task force talking about what the Center for Teaching at Sewanee would look like. It was that task force and what would become the Center for Teaching there had a really significant sort of backing from both the dean level administration and the faculty. So it was a great thing to be a part of. That group of folks spanning from very junior faculty to more senior faculty figured out over that year what they really wanted a Center for Teaching to look like. I would then go on to serve on the what's the term? The faculty advisory board, the Center for Teaching there. And after a couple of years, wouldn't you know it? I guess I seemed like a good choice to be the next person to lead it. There, the Center for Teaching, assuming this is still true today as it was when I was there, has two co-directors that are on the faculty at Sewanee. They each get a single course release per school year to engage in that work. I was one of those folks. Sort of from the work that the leaders had done before me, brainstormed the kinds of things that we wanted to do, including, we designed, I had a hand in, although I was not a significant leader in the initial, a course design institute, numerous workshops and faculty showcase presentations, things like that. So let's see.
So hold on a second before we get through that, because for someone new in their career, you've had a lot of really interesting experiences, and I think that you and I met during one of these. Because I know we eventually met at Pod when you were doing more formal teaching center stuff. But I remember we were on a task force with Guy Boyson and Missy Beers looking at the development of digital credentials within psychology. And I'm trying to remember, probably 17 or 16, something like that. Do you remember the year?
I don't remember. If you want me to dig through my Vita.
No, it's okay. I'm just remembering. And I guess the reason I'm asking is I'm not sure if it predates you going into the teaching center or not. I'm just trying to sort of map that, because it's kind of interesting, because I think that these task forces through the Society for Teaching and Psychology, which are focused on certain aspects of the presidential initiatives, often do lead people even further down that teaching path. And I think this is one of them that might have.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the way I conceptualize a lot of these things, so we've got service that we would do to for an institution like Sewanee, and then we've got service that we might engage into the broader field, like we might engage in through STP. And I kind of see those, for me, having run along parallel tracks, both sort of feeding into one another, but ultimately sort of originating from separate sources. So my involvement with STP, around this same time, early in my time at Sewanee, I served as the chair of the Early Career Psychologist Committee, which, if I'm not mistaken, was originally an initiative put forth when Regan Gurung was president of STP. And as it would happen, individuals who served on that Early Career Psychologist Committee, or ECP committee, have gone a long way in STP. I mean, two individuals that I know of that were Early Career Psychologist Committee members along the same time as me, are currently on the executive committee for STP. And shortly after that, that role was winding down for me. I started serving as the director of the annual Conference on Teaching, or ACT, STP's now flagship conference, and the place where they give out the annual awards and everything like that. I served 4 years as the director of that conference, having just wrapped that up during the last calendar year. So, I think as a colleague of mine at Sewanee once said, you know how you've got the three pillars of teaching, research, and service.
Mm-hmm.
I used to say, it's like you've just got one real big pillar. It's all about teaching, the scholarship, the teaching itself, and the service. And though I like to think of myself as a little more multifaceted than that, I suppose I do have one big pillar in the middle. So yeah, I sort of engaged in both of those things, and I guess I would say that, I'm someone that I like to see good work happen. I like working closely with the people that I've gotten to know, and working on the tasks that they and I care about, and so a lot of it's just a lot of my involvement has just been a matter of just say yes. Can I fit it in? Can I do it? Do I want to be a part of it? And usually the answer is yes, and that's how I get involved in so many things.
Yeah, and it is one of those interesting parts of academia, and that is if you're good and competent, you get asked to do more.
And turn your work in on time. Yes, that's right.
That's right. So interesting. So now you made the jump from Sewanee to a teaching center. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So while I was at Sewanee, shortly after I had taken the role of co-director of the Center for Teaching there, I was due for a sabbatical. It was the next school year. And I was interested in engaging more in the Center for Teaching and Learning work. So what I did, and in fact, Chris, I don't know how well you remember this, but we actually talked around that period of time. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do for sabbatical that would allow me to have a good sort of embedded experience in a Center for Teaching and Learning. So
I remember well because
STP, the POP. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I remember well. We had a nice conversation. I remember where I was standing and what I told you. So go on. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah. So many individuals in STP are members of things like Centers for Teaching and Learning, but there's another organization that really fits that bill nicely, the POD network. So I posted to the POD network listserv and I said, hey, everyone, here's a little bit about me. I'm looking to go on a year-long sabbatical where I, really embed myself in a Center for Teaching and Learning and see what all you do. And it was at that time that I talked with a bunch of CTL leaders from across the country, from Alaska to Maine, from Georgia to Wisconsin, all over the place. And as it just so happened, Carol Herney at Colby College was very interested in the background that I had and thought it seemed like a good fit for me to come up that way. And indeed it was. So I'd spend a year-long sabbatical there. Well, I should say here now. Yeah. I'm back here now. So I spent a year, let's see, this was about 2 years ago now. So I think that was the 2018, 2019 school year, something like that.
It was indeed, because I talked to you about coming to possibly my institution, but I was in the position of maybe moving institutions. And
that's right. I do remember that. Yeah.
I couldn't offer the same opportunity that other people could. And I was disappointed because I thought it would have been a great opportunity to work with you. But ultimately, you landed in a really, really fantastic place.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed that sabbatical immensely. Was in a fortunate circumstance to be really productive in terms of scholarly work, to contribute to the broader teaching and learning initiatives at Colby. That's where I really got my feet wet in some processes associated with mid-semester feedback, something that I now think of myself as fairly experienced and knowledgeable about. And additionally, it's sabbatical, so do a little bit of vacationing. I also, as a longtime hobby of mine, got involved with the Colby College Ultimate Frisbee team. Mm-hmm. Coached the men's team, and they qualified for the national tournament that year. I think this was really all about how good they were, but I guess it was a nice little feature on the sideline.
You take whatever credit you can take, Jordan. Any credit you can
take. That's right. So let's see. I was there for that school year. It was great. It was productive. I returned to Sewanee in the co-directorship of the Center for Teaching there. But my now supervisor, Carol, here at Colby, was promoted to the Associate Provost of Faculty Development role, and was looking for someone to sort of, really develop and take the reins of the Center for Teaching and Learning here at Colby. And I was began this school year here, so the 2020-2021 school year, started the new role here as the Senior Associate Director. So, I mean, to sort of, put a bow on the whole story, my pathway towards this Center for Teaching and Learning stuff, and the position I have now, is all through sort of being very intentional, thoughtful, reflective on teaching related practices, saying yes to a lot of opportunities for my own teacher training and to get involved in working working with others on their teaching. And then starting to engage in more of the sort of administrative side of teaching, right? How do we end up developing teachers? How do we get folks thinking about, best practices and evidence-based practices, and how do we make that compelling, right? Not just like it's the medicine you have to take, but this could be a really fun way to do things. And then I suppose if you keep working hard, you keep figuring things out, you keep researching things you want to research, opportunities will arise, and here I am.
Well, I appreciate you saying it that way because, as you know, we are this podcast is a branch of psych sessions. And had you said that you were lucky, I was going to have to, in a very Eric Landrum style, chastise you for saying that lucky has nothing to do with it. It's hard work and effort that get you opportunities. And I think that that's what you did. I mean, that reaching out, I remember when I saw that, you and I had talked through that task force, and then we had met again at Pod one year, and I was impressed at your ingenuity to put that out there and to make yourself available in that capacity, because I had a pretty good feeling that would put you in good stead for a position at some point. Because what is really challenging now is that as teaching centers are becoming more and more the norm, the institutions are really looking for people to come in to have a big impact. And one of the things that makes someone more effective is really having some knowledge of what to do. And you worked under, and don't ever let her listen to this, but Carol Herney, who's amazing. And I'm certain that you picked up a lot from Carol about how to do this. And then Carol was smart enough to bring you back to do it when she developed into this other position, which has more roles. So more responsibility. So I think it was a really smart move on your part to do that. But let me ask you, you're still pretty early. I mean, I mentioned I went to this conference in 95. I finished my PhD in 95. You finished your PhD in 2011. And so you're early in your career and you made this move. I made this move much later in my career. I had been teaching for nearly 20 years before I made this move. So I know what it did to my professional identity. And I'm curious, you can comment a little bit on how it impacted your professional identity. What changes, what similarities, anything that surprised you with regard to how you perceive yourself and how you think others perceive you?
Yeah. So I think a couple of things come to mind. And here's the first thing. Many years ago, I'm not sure the precise year, I went to the Pod Network conference that was held in Louisville, which was very close to Sewanee. So a handful of us drove there. I don't know, it had to be somewhere around 2015, 2016, something like that. At that time, my primary role certainly was still as a faculty member. So at the time, I really had a hard time really thinking about a lot of the presentations and ideas that I was encountering. And as I would come to find out, they would make more sense to me later. But at the time, I found it very difficult because the sort of framework is here's some stuff, here's some ideas, here's some content that are very useful for educational developers, Center for Teaching and Learning leaders, folks in those kinds of roles, right? I kept trying to see it from the lens of like, what will I use for my own courses, right? And what I would come to find, year after year, as I got more and more involved in leading, first the Center for Teaching at Sewanee, now having leadership role at the Center for Teaching and Learning at Colby, is that, it's great to think about what I could do with any of these bits of information for my own courses. But now my framework is, for whatever I take in, how can I package that, communicate that, work with faculty members on that kind of information for their courses, right? So, how does it trickle down from me to them to their students? And it took a while, cognitively, it took me quite some time to kind of wrap my head around that.
Yeah.
But now, I feel like I'm in a fairly comfortable place. I've been doing those kinds of things for a couple of years at least. And, not to infantilize our faculty members out there, but our faculty members are sort of like my students, right? They're the folks, they're my audience. So I'm always thinking about how is it that I, best communicate this information to, the audience that I have. So, professionally, that was a role shift. I'm happy to have made it. I like working with faculty a lot. Colby is a liberal arts college, and our work in our Center for Teaching and Learning works with our broad-ranging faculty, right, from across all the disciplines. And I was a student at a liberal arts college when I was an undergraduate, and I found, looking across disciplines to be really invigorating and fun. So I've always had a sort of appreciation for that, and I get to do it all the time now. There was a time this spring where during our mid-semester feedback, I engaged in, I'll see if I can get it right. I think I engaged in consultations with 5 different faculty members in one day. That's how my schedule worked. And there's a faculty member in chemistry, computer science, one in sociology, one in politics, and one in English. It's like I'm working with all across the board, and it's a blast.
And it's interesting because what you said, I think, is really fascinating about how you have to reshift the work from the students to the faculty, but you're actually trying to achieve some of the same goals. You're just doing it in a different way with regard to size. So, for example, it looks, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm just thinking about it. You instead of teaching a whole class, you're teaching one faculty member how to try to apply something within the context of their class versus trying to teach the entire class how to do something. It's an interesting way to think about it, and I think that as you talked about it, I started to think, that's kind of the way it struck me as well. Is that it's just a shift on who I'm teaching now, and a shift in terms of the number of people I'm going to have in the room when I'm teaching. Yeah,
it is, and I would say, in some ways it's very similar. There are some things that are distinctive about it, right? Unlike working with undergraduates, when I've taught introductory psychology, I'm not the first person to tell them about their basic concepts. And faculty members do have a lot of ideas about how student learning works. I'd say sometimes those are well-placed ideas. Sometimes they happen to be not so well-placed. But that said, I find them to be a really great audience to work with. At times challenging, right? Because we all have our expectations, and individuals that are faculty members are all very bright, right? And these are folks that I'm going to just trick into doing something. And I think there are some core features that really bring faculty members together. And I think, in the moments where I'm more successful, I sort of get at some of those core features that I think cut across disciplines, right? So, for example, I think something that is really valuable is, whenever possible, drawing from some sort of evidence base and having that be the foundation of, whatever it is I'm recommending or leading a workshop on or things like that. But I would say that how people think about evidence can vary widely across disciplines, even in psychology itself. How people think about and perceive evidence is different, right? My background is fairly firmly in the quantitative side of psychology rather than, say, the qualitative side, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, thinking about ultimately a lot of this stuff that we do in Centers for Teaching and Learning is an act of persuasion, right? Here are some things that are recommended learning principles. How do I persuade you into thinking that, yes, that's the great thing to try out in my class, and I'm going to do so, because we not only have to convince the teacher, we have to convince the teacher to convince 35 students or something like that. So it's an act of persuasion, but that makes it sound sort of like adversarial or manipulative, right? And I don't think I don't think of it that way, and I hope others wouldn't think of it that way.
Yeah.
I think ultimately what it's about is how can I have you as a faculty member see the truth behind this evidence so clearly that you must implement that in your courses.
Interesting. So let me ask you this. Do you teach still? And if you were teaching still, how would you be with regard to people talking to you about teaching from a center? Now, I know you worked at an institution, but I'm just sort of curious to think about that a little bit.
Yeah. So I'll answer that first question because it's real easy. Right now, I'm not currently teaching.
Uh-huh.
In my role, it's not a part of my duties. I have the opportunity to if I wish, but I'm not currently. I'm sure I will get back to it before too long. I'll miss it before too long. But right now, I'm not currently. In terms of how I would and how I receive feedback from individuals in the Center for Teaching and Learning. I'll say this, the mid-semester feedback stuff that I do, I have also had that type of mid-semester feedback done for me in my own courses. For example, I was in a Center for Teaching at Sewanee. Another colleague on our faculty advisory board did mid-semester feedback for me. And for me, the way I think about it is this, that, depending on where the information is coming from, whether it's from, a Center for Teaching and Learning staff person, or if it's something more like mid-semester feedback, that's kind of a consolidation of student voices. The way I think about all of these things is that there are many more perspectives out there that I might not be seeing right now. I think about a lot of perspectives, right? But, we've all got blind spots. We all have things
that we
expect will go one way or we expect will work and don't. And for me, I guess as I would think about any sort of, research question or teaching question, what I'm really trying to do is triangulate and get a lot of viewpoints that point us all in one direction, right? To say here's what's really going on. Here's the view I had on the classroom. Here's the view this consultant has had on the classroom, this Center for Teaching and Learning staff. Here's the view my students have on the classroom. And one of the beauties of doing things like mid-semester feedback with, a staff individual who's not teaching the course, sometimes students don't want to tell their faculty members all the dirt, but they will happily tell someone else, right? So I could try all day to get that information as a faculty member, but they're just not going to give it, and that's totally fair, right? Like I don't blame students for feeling that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, to me, I'm all about having more eyes on the problem, more eyes on the circumstances, and figuring out what's going on.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. So, and what you just said about faculty and students and the way students respond. I am always surprised when I observe a class and then I ask the faculty member to step out so I can talk to the students. I'm always surprised at the response that I get from students. That surprises me in terms of not being something that I was able to pick up on my short time there. So the students, because they have this extended experience, are able to talk about things that I might not have picked up on. So I find that information very useful. Sometimes it's something subtle. Sometimes it's something big that I just didn't see because it didn't happen during that class. But I think that's really important. And I think that the value of student voice is really, for what you're describing, is really important. So let me ask you one other thing about what's happened with
Mhm.
regard to your career and the shift. If someone was looking to do this, or they were just starting in a center, what are one of the two big pieces of advice you would give them? And it could be anything. It could be advice about how to do things effectively. It can be just, this is something I hadn't expected. Just what sorts of words of wisdom might you pass on to people who are interested in this kind of career?
All right. What I'd like to do, I'd like to speak to sort of maybe both sides of this equation. So one side being like people who want to get into this, and
Uh-huh.
then the other side will also speak to like what I might recommend for folks sort of like early in a center for teaching and learning role. So hold me to it, Chris. I'm going to do
Great.
both.
All right, I got you. That's great.
For those wanting to go into it, right? I can speak to the pathway that I took, and I think that that information will be useful. But of course, this is situated in my own experience and the institutions that I've been a part of. So take this with a grain of salt. It is based on one individual's circumstances,
Mm-hmm.
but for me, it really was a matter of being interested, being passionate about something, seeing opportunities where they existed, right? An opportunity to be on a task force, an opportunity to go to a teaching workshop, an opportunity to get a small grant to go to a conference and other things like that, and pursuing them, right? And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
especially as someone who's worked mostly at smaller institutions, not only does that sort of move you along, right, and build up your CV or whatever it is, to me, that seems a little more trivial than kind of like the big picture of it. Like, do you get to know people? Does doing this work establish you as an individual with a reputation for engaging in this kind of work?
Mm-hmm.
I think what moved me down this path is that I just kept taking on these teaching related, roles and leadership opportunities. And I love doing it. And I found it really thrilling and really exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And, if, it might be different if I worked at an institution that had, 4,000 faculty members or something like that. But
Mm-hmm.
having worked at places that have, 150 to 400, you make a name for yourself pretty quick.
Yes, you
So,
do. Yes, you
I
do.
think that has been, for those interested in this, it's get down and dirty, get into the weeds, and get involved, and before you know it, folks will be asking for your attention rather than you having to seek it out.
Yes, they will. And more folks than sometimes you can handle.
That is true. We could spend another hour figuring out how to say no to the immense amount of requests that you'll get.
Oh, yeah.
We'll save that for another time.
That's right. Yeah.
I would say, additionally, I actually did remember, I often forget, but I actually did remember to return back to the other point.
Good.
So what I would recommend for individuals sort of like new in this role, if I haven't said it explicitly so far, I think something that is usually true is that centers for teaching and learning are going to serve a broad swath of campus, right?
Mm-hmm.
Usually the entire institution, or unless you're at a very large institution, some big segment, right? Like the graduate school or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say something. Okay, I'll say two things that might sound contradictory at first, but I think they are tremendously useful. So one is your audience is now broader, so be aware of that, right? So I don't just work with psychologists; I work with English faculty members and religious studies faculty members and physicists and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Your audience is now broader, so the things that you're doing you have to cut across.
Mm-hmm.
However, don't lose sight of what you have learned and what you bring to the equation. This is a Psych Sessions podcast, from your psychology training and psychology background, right?
Yep.
I think these things will sound intuitive when I say them out loud, but they are actually really prized and valuable things, right? So being able to design a most basic of survey or assessment tool, tremendously useful in this kind of work, but plenty of individuals in other disciplines do not have a lot of experience with it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, having a sense of what it means to do sort of, whether it's quantitative or qualitative scholarly work, surveys and responses, focus groups, things like that. And I would say as well, like, moving a little bit beyond the sort of like day-to-day stuff as well, having some theoretical frameworks that we draw from psychology that are useful for this kind of work. Now, I would say, I may be a little biased, but I'd say psychology has really a leg up on this over some other disciplines. Like, we're the field that studies learning. We're the field that studies cognition. We're the field that studies group dynamics, right? Like, these kinds of things are tremendously important for what happens in the classroom. So, I am frequently, turning to, and people are frequently asking me about things like the learning sciences, or as I have often put in materials associated, with either, job applications or presentations, for example, self-determination theory and motivation, right? Like, what motivates students, what motivates teachers. These are really crucial things to have in the back of your mind that, may very well be a fundamental part of one's training as a psychologist. I can't pull that apart from how I think about things professionally or personally.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. And what's going to be interesting about this season of this podcast is we are going to interview a few people who are not coming from psychology. And I'm going to actually push on that a little bit and find out, because what you said is absolutely true. I'm a cognitive psychologist, Jordan. So for me, a lot of the stuff in learning sciences a lot of that material is material I have seen in many, many different places, in many different contexts. And part of the goal is to apply it. And I think that it's a really seamless fit for many of us to go from psychology to teaching centers, but that doesn't mean it's a necessary feature to be a psychologist. It makes one part of the job easier. And I love your advice about don't lose sight of that, because the things that you discussed are terms that are more generally applied now and don't necessarily reside just within narrow disciplines of psychology. I say cognitive load, and people in English know what I'm talking about now because it's become such a prominent term in the teaching and learning literature. So I think that's really interesting advice and really useful advice. I also think that one of the things that I'm sort of fascinated by with you in particular is you made this switch pretty early in your career, as I said, and I think that with that you made the decision to leave a faculty position to go to a staff position.
That's right.
And that's a move that not everybody makes. And I made that move too. And I know the trials and tribulations that go along with it. And it's sort of what I started with. And that is, as you look at it, I mean, one of the pieces of advice, I'd be curious to see if you share this, I tell people is, no matter how much you worked during the summer when you were a faculty member, you had the control over how much you were going to do. So you might have worked 60 hours a week as a faculty member during the summer, but it was on things that you wanted to do. As a center director, I get to work on a lot of things. And I'm very fortunate. I have a terrific boss. I have a really good institution. I get to do a lot of things I like to do, but I also have responsibilities to the institution that extend all 12 months. And that's a difference for me. And I tell people, if you're going to go into this, know that might be a role that you have to identify with and understand the implications of that.
Yeah, I agree. I think, though not all faculty members would feel this way all the time, there is a fair amount of liberty in faculty life. And I think that is especially true in the summertime. We folks like Chris and I and the types of staff positions we have don't have quite as much liberty. Although I would say that, the position I have really does have a pretty wide-ranging scope. I'm still encouraged to engage in scholarly work. In fact, I on a manuscript earlier today, right? A scholarship of teaching and learning manuscript. So I'm not just punching the clock and cranking out that other faculty members are going to use or something like that.
Yeah.
But no, you're right. It is a shift, and I would say, for me, making this shift was both a professional choice and a personal choice. I did it in consultation with consultation. That sounds very formal. With, the woman who's now my wife. I'm
glad you consulted with her. It's probably the right thing to do.
We were trying to think about We try to think about. That's right. Yeah. Well, I can't say no to a good consultation. But we were talking about, where is it that we envision ourselves living, being? Where can we both work? Where we want to spend our time and things like that. And there are probably. I think the change from faculty position to staff role that I have in a Center for Teaching and Learning is one that allowed for more opportunities or choices in terms of things like geography and institution type than might have been the case if I were just searching for a different faculty role. I don't know that to be true, but that's something that seemed true in looking at opportunities for these positions in Centers for Teaching and Learning. So it in a more sort of philosophical way, it became a question about, where do I want to be personally, professionally? What do I want to take part in? What's important to me? And what's the direction that I'm headed? And I came to think that that this was sort of the trajectory that I was on. That it was something that. Not like I was getting on a roller coaster and I wasn't in control of it, but I just found myself, leaning in this direction more and more, to the extent that this is something that happened fairly early in my, career post PhD. I'll say that the last time I was on this podcast, I was talking with Eric and Garth, and they pointed out that I tend to move fairly quickly from one thing to the next. I think that is true, and here I am today.
That's right. And I think you bring up.
I will not refute that. I get a little bit of an itch, and I decide I want to try something new, whether it's a research topic or a different type of position or appointment.
Yeah, and I think that your point earlier, and this is the case with me as well, is that if you're at the right institution, they allow you the latitude to do it. I work on scholarship. I am presenting at ACT this year. I continue to do that kind of work, both within psychology and outside of psychology. And I think if you land at the right institution, you do get that kind of freedom. I think maybe we'll end this with some good advice is to go in and try to really see what the position would be, because they're all different. All these teaching center roles are different. I suspect if we compared your job to my job, even though we both technically do the same kind of thing, our day-to-day life is different, and that's okay. You get a chance to shape it. I've really shaped my position in a way that has been really good for me and for my career. And it sounds like you are in that kind of place as well. So I think that's terrific.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there, Chris, that individuals interested in going into this line of work, this Centers for Teaching and Learning are more variable in how they do things than you might expect of, say, a psychology department. So really looking into their history, what they do at that institution is tremendously important. It is also true that unlike what we have when we say tenured or associate professor or full professor, those titles mean similar things across institutions. The titles in Centers for Teaching and Learning are not equivalent. Associate director at one place, assistant director at another, they may mean very different things. So really digging into how that place operates will be immensely useful for individuals thinking about taking on those kinds of roles.
Well, Jordan, thanks so much for doing this today. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate your time and your insights, and I look forward to continuously bumping into you in the various places that you and I overlap.
As always, Chris, it's a pleasure, and bump into you soon.
That's right. Thanks. Take care, Jordan.